Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live Bossed Up panel on managing personal relationships while being stuck at home. I know that quarantine has so many of us at home right now, and today's conversation with our incredible panelists is going to help provide a little bit of insight into how we can psychologically weather this storm besides the other factors going on right now. If you're just tuning in, as you make your way in, find the chat function either at the top or bottom of your screen, and go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from. We've been hosting panels like this all week long and last week as well, and we love first starting out by hearing where folks are coming in from. And do make sure that you select the drop-down menu that says to all panelists and attendees, or to everyone, so that we can all continue the conversation. Lots of Denverites, love it. Hello from Denver, North Dakota, Washington State, Sacramento, San Diego, our Canadian friends to the north, Lincoln, Nebraska, love it. I know Amber. Hey, Amber, so glad you're here. So here's how we're gonna get started today. If you have not joined us before, if this is your very first time doing anything with Bossed Up, let me know. I want to welcome you first timers in particular. And I also want to take a moment to really set some intentions. I know we are all experiencing a ton of stress and anxiety on a chronic level right now, even if we are fortunate enough to have good physical health right now. I want you to take a deep breath and then think about what it is you want to get out of today's conversation. And maybe share in chat, if you're feeling so inspired, why you are tuning in, what brought you here. Last week, we hosted panels on stress management, on managing virtual teams, on working from home while retaining a sense of work-life balance. And yesterday, we had a great panel on job searching amid COVID-19 uncertainty. And so all of those panels and this one, once it's over, are recorded and uploaded onto our website. So if you haven't already seen our website, bossedup.org/blog is the place to find all those resources and even more. Welcome to my first timers. So glad to have you here. And I'm Emilie Aries, by the way. So I want to introduce myself. I'm a speaker, an author, a podcast host. I usually would be spending time flying across the country right now, speaking at conferences, companies, delivering workshops. All of that has gone away for the time being. But I do want you to know that if I can ever be of service to your team in the future, I'm still booking up for the fall. And we'd love to sort of keep in touch in that way. My book, Bossed Up, is based off of everything I've learned over the better part of the last decade running this company, Bossed Up, which I started back in 2013. And it's really my journey and my own experience with burnout and bossing up, right? Like overcoming burnout, taking charge of my career and life. And it features the stories of 15 other women who've applied the same tactics to their lives, who do not share my background, right? 15 women from across the country, from across different industries, who've bossed up in their own way. And you can actually access it on audible.com right now if you're looking for some quarantine reads. Similarly, if you like to listen, you should check out the Bossed Up podcast. Twice a week, we deliver new episodes with expert interviews and quick boss tips to help you navigate career transition and advocate for what you want to get out of your career and your life. I'm so glad to hear from those who are tuning in right now. And I have to say, I know a lot of people are hurting right now. So I want you to know that this is a space that we're creating for us to come together to build a sense of community online when we can't be together in person, and to do our very best to give you some tactics, some tools, some takeaways that you can implement into your life right now. That being said, this is not a therapy session. It's close, but it's not a therapy session. So if you find yourself in need, or if you are experiencing any kind of a mental, physical, or health crisis of any kind, we're going to share some resources where you can go get help directly. So today's conversation is meant to be a safe and brave space where you can be candid and you can be yourself. And if you need more one-on-one support, we're going to leave you with places to go for just that. Keep in touch with me on the internet too. I'll be in your inboxes with this recording before the day's out. But if you want to find me on the internet, that's all the places to go. All right. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to our fantastic panelists today. These are women I have had the pleasure of working with for years. In Lena's case, since my very first event with Bossed Up back in 2013, and they are really going to share a lot of valuable insights. So Lena Derhally is not only a licensed psychotherapist, she's also a published author. Congrats, Lena, on your book. She's a contributor in many different platforms, but you might find her writing about parenting in the Washington Post. And she's got a lot of great things to share when it comes to love, relationships, and navigating uncertainty. Tiffany Wright has been featured at Bossed Up Bootcamp as well. Tiffany, you're tuning in from LA, right? Yes. So she's based in LA. Lena's in DC. She's an associate clinical social worker and a total boss. And I'm so delighted to have you here, Tiffany. And finally, Lindsey Foss is not only a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boss in her own right with a bunch of folks who she's managing remotely right now in her organization, but is also a Bossed Up Bootcamp alum and a Bossed Up Bootcamp featured trainer. So welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. To answer the quick question we have in here, oh, Kirby's already on it. I do want to give a special shout out to Kirby and Ellie, who are on the Bossed Up team, who are also joining me to help answer questions in chat. The webinar will last for about an hour, and then I'll send you the recording right afterwards. So I've got a few questions for our panelists here, and then I will open it up to you all in chat. First, let's talk about intimacy and partnerships when we are all stuck at home. If we are doing what we should be doing, most of us in most places right now are not supposed to leave the house unless there's a good reason to do so. Now, later on, we're going to talk about relationships that are experiencing abuse. So I want to set that aside for a moment. We are not talking about abusive relationships just yet, but for the everyday annoyance that I think a lot of us have, I don't know about you, but till death do us part didn't seem to include being surrounded by one another 24 hours a day in the same 900 square foot space. You know, I think a lot of us are driving our partners up a wall. What do we do to prevent ourselves from taking out all this frustration and anxiety on whoever's nearby? And or how can we manage our own mental well-being when we are feeling annoyed by our loved ones? Hey there. Or our little ones.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and start.
Please.
So something that I think is really important when it comes to just relationships in general, regardless if you're sharing a space or not, is really understanding the importance of empathy and compassion, right? Everyone is experiencing some type of stressor right now, right? And so what happens is people take onto their stress and then they project it on to someone else. And they're not the source of the stress. They're just there, right? And so you have to remember that you have your own stress right now. Your partner has their own stress. Whoever else is cohabiting the space with you, family members, roommates, whatever, everyone has a little bit of stress right now. So one, just having that compassion, and two, breathing. Oh my goodness, I cannot underscore enough how important it is to breathe, because everything is intensified in your body right now. Everything seems immediate. Everything seems like anxiously important, right? And it's so important to breathe so you can know how to regulate your emotions that you're going through right now, whether they're positive or negative. So really thinking about before you respond, especially if you are in a place of irritation or frustration, to really breathe. I like to tell my clients 5-second inhales through the nose, 5 seconds exhales through the mouth, and you go through a couple of rounds of that, right? If you're feeling like you want to lash out on someone, breathe first, tell them, you know what, let's talk about it later. Right? Or just try to really think about what you're going to say before you say it. And space. Take space. You don't have to be under each other, even though you're in the same space. Be in
Lindsey,
separate
what
rooms.
would you add to that? I love that, Tiffany.
Those are really important tips. I have two other general things and one specific communication strategy I think we can use. One is I find it helpful to think about a positive to negative interaction ratio. So the general ratio that research has found is important is 7 positive interactions for every 1 negative. And so in my own life, I really use that to think, do I want to bring up the fact that, he didn't wipe down the counter at lunch, or do I want to save this maybe negative conversation for something that's a little more important? So it helps me pick my battles if I keep that 7-to-1 ratio in mind.
Nice.
And I also think it's important to keep humor in your relationship. So
Totally.
there's a thing going around, I don't know if people saw it on social media about, make up an imaginary coworker so you can blame things on them. So Nancy left cups all over the house or something like that, just as a way to keep some humor, but still bring up some things that you might need to address. And when we do bring up those things, I think it's really important to think about expressing our feeling and our need, and not being critical. So, instead of saying like, this place is a disaster, you never clean up around here, you can say, I feel really scattered and it's hard for me to focus when the living room is really cluttered. So I need for us to have time every night that we pick things up so we can start fresh in the morning. So when you are going to bring up something that's important, make sure you're expressing your feeling about what's happening, and then what you need from your partner, so they have a step that they can actually take. You're not just calling them out for something and leaving them with nothing to do.
Totally. Love that. How about you, Lena?
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think it's also important to address the fact that a lot of couples have very opposite ways of dealing with stress and anxiety. And I'm seeing this a lot with friends and with clients, is that, with something like this, one person may be really high stress and one person may react to it a little bit differently. And so trying to have some compassion around our differences about how we react to stress.
Totally.
And some of the ways I think we can do that is through validating our partner's experience, even though it's completely different than ours. I think a lot of the time, I know, especially sort of in heteronormative relationships, men especially want to try to fix the problem. I had this problem in my own home this morning where I screamed at my husband, I just want a little empathy. Because I'm homeschooling, I'm doing all these things. And, he was trying to make it better for me. And he said, you just have to accept the situation you're in. And I'm like, well, duh. Of course I have to. I know that already. I just want you to acknowledge and validate like everything that I've had to sacrifice and give up to do this homeschooling. And so I think it's important with our partners, like we can't change a lot of what's going on and we can't fix it. And so just being able to validate like, yeah, that's really disappointing that you had to cancel that talk that you were going to give. Or, yeah, that's really frustrating that you have to, do more around the house now, or you have, or cook more. So just validating somebody who may have a different way of dealing with things.
Yeah, totally. I remember distinctly having a conversation with Brad the Boo years ago now. And I was like, practice these words. That sucks. I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to apologize for whatever bad thing is happening to me. I just want you to acknowledge the bad thing that's happening to me. It's not your fault and I don't want you to fix it. It's just, that sucks. I'm sorry. And we both parrot each other back that when we need to. And it's really, really helpful. I'm also reminded of what you were saying and how we are so different and how people respond to stress. This one little nugget in Dare to Lead, one of Brené Brown's most recent books, talks about how in the face of stress and anxiety, some people become overfunctioners and some people become underfunctioners. And that took me a really long time to understand, because in the face of stress, I'm like, okay, what needs to get done? Let's go crazy. Let's just, action is what calms me down. And a lot of my family members get paralyzed in the face of stress. And I could never understand how you could just sit there and not do something. So having compassion, knowing that people's stress responses are so different is so, so key. I think that's a good point. We have some folks here who've already expressed the nature of my next question here. Who is it that's weighing in? Michaela, who talks about temporarily relocating to move in. Is that Michaela comment? Somebody's comment. Emily's comment, who temporarily relocated to Birmingham, where her parents live in a 2-bedroom condo. So her husband and her can work remotely while grandparents provide childcare. And it cues me up perfectly for my next question on multiple generations sharing space. Now, for many families in many different communities, that was already the case. But I think now more than ever, folks are finding themselves occupying the same small spaces as multiple generations of the family. So what are some strategies for, coping with, but also maintaining loving relationships between maybe in-laws and yourself, while also retaining your own sense of identity and not becoming the child when you are in fact an adult? So for those kinds of households that have been restructured, reorganized, what coping mechanisms would you employ? Whoever wants to take it can jump in. Lindsey, it looks like
I can start out with a couple of things that I think we can keep in mind. One is go easy on everyone and on yourself. We're not going to be superstar employees and superstar moms and superstar daughters all at the same time, especially in this situation. And so I do think it's important for us to kind of lower expectations a little bit of ourselves and everyone else, so if you need to put on a movie for your kids to watch for 2 hours so that you can get a little work done, that might be not normally what you do with screen time, but you might need to do it right now, or
Right.
if you need to do your work from 8 to 10 p.m. while somebody else can take care of things around the house, and that's not your normal time, that's okay. I also think it's really, really important to remember that high stress shuts down the parts of our brains that think logically and problem solve. And so everybody is under a lot of stress right now, your kids, your parents, everyone. So sometimes the most important thing you can do is to get everyone together and do something fun, something playful that can regulate everyone, calm everyone's body down so that everyone's brain can turn back on to the logical problem solving part. So if it feels like you're stuck and everyone is just kind of like fighting and in conflict all the time, drop it and find something fun to do, something that's silly and gets people laughing, and then that can kind of grease the wheel to be able to maybe solve some problems.
Love it. Stand-up comedy has been like a daily occurrence in our household now. Tiffany?
I want to piggyback on that. I was going to say, especially in multi-generational homes, there's an opportunity to cultivate joy and intimacy, and that can bring down the angst that some people are in, right? So this is an opportunity to maybe get to know that elder that's in the house a little bit more, talking about things that have nothing to do with the current circumstances, right? Asking them about themselves, asking your child to teach you something, or letting them lead the way in a play activity. So if you get people engaged in the things that bring them joy, or, get their mind off of the current circumstances, that can bring the edge down as well. And it also shifts the atmosphere of the home from being this place that feels like a prison to a place that feels warm and inviting, and people get to show their best selves and really get to be open, right? I mean, there's tons of games that you can play, of course, like board games or whatnot, or watching movies together. But there's tons of online kind of like question prompting kind of activities and exercises, icebreakers that you can bring into the home space. You can ask people about different things that they enjoy, their favorite hobbies, like if they could be on a vacation right now, where would it be? What would it be doing, right? So there's ways to cultivate joy and connection in the midst of the stress.
Definitely. Lena, how about you?
Well, I am in that exact situation right now. We actually relocated, my husband and I and our children, to Connecticut, where my parents are in the rural countryside. My dad doesn't drive. So, it was in part to help my parents, and but we're working as a team. But it's interesting that every single person has a unique dynamic. So I have a unique dynamic with my mother, and I have a unique dynamic with my father and my husband and my daughter, for example, whereas my husband has his own unique dynamic with my mother. So there's all these dynamics, you know, that you really do have to manage. And everybody does have their different stress. My father is a very high risk person with COVID-19. So we have a lot of stress around, you know, him possibly getting this, and, you know, and who may be an asymptomatic carrier. So everyone sort of has this very different level of stress. But I think if we can embrace the simultaneous part of that, it's okay to be annoyed with people when you're living in circumstances. Plus, there's a space for gratitude as well. Just gratitude that, you know, that I have my parents here, you know, just the very simple things, or that I do, you know, get to do a board game with my children in the middle of the day and have that time for that joy. And so I think being compassionate to myself when I get annoyed and I snap at someone, because that's going to happen no matter what, no matter how mindful and zen we are. We're just in these circumstances. And I think apologies are good with that as well.
Yes.
Apologizing when we've snapped at somebody, vocalizing our needs when we need space, and working as a team. So today was the day that I kind of lost my marbles in the morning. Another day it may be someone else, but my family rallied around me. So I had an hour break today. So I was able to reset my mind frame and come on here.
Right.
And so being able to advocate for those needs with each person, you know, saying what they need at a certain time and rallying around that person to give them those needs. It's a trade-off, but you know, I think being mindful that if we advocate for our needs, and we should also be there to help somebody else in the family.
Totally.
For their
and
needs.
I just want to add something to that about the forgiveness piece, right? Is everyone is going to come with different strengths in each day. And so remembering that everyone is just doing their best. And when you do feel really irritated, irritated at someone, to try to remind yourself of that, right? And that's also the point of trying to balance the space with positive activities. So when there is that high intense, you know, energy going on, you can try to remember, okay, grandma is going through this right now, or she feels this way, or granddad or aunt, uncle, whomever, right? And you can have something positive to, you know, give yourself in that time of narration when you're really irritated and just want to like blow off on everybody.
Totally.
And one resource I've been using with family is to try to create a shared language for how people need their needs met, is the Healthy Minds Platter by Dan Siegel. And it's 7 elements that we all need to stay psychologically and emotionally healthy. And so I've been talking through that with families about how are each of you getting these 7 things each day. And it can be a shared language where you can say, so one of the things is time in, I need time to myself. And so you could say, you know, I haven't had time in all day long and I need to have some time in tonight. And that can clue in the rest of your family that, okay, we need to make sure that we enable her to get that. And you can do that with all the different elements of the Healthy Mind Platter.
I think that's really important. I think sometimes we forget, in trying to be of service to everyone else and try to be the perfect daughter, sister, mother, whatever to everyone else, we forget how essential making sure that our basic needs being met really is for us to continue to show up like that for other people. So especially for those caregivers out there, you know, your self-care right now is not optional. It's more important than ever. We're not talking about mani-pedis and cucumbers on the eyes. We're talking about, if you're an introvert, give yourself some quiet alone time. You know, if you're an extrovert, you need to go call your girlfriend on FaceTime right now and catch up. And those things are not optional. They're foundational. And under big times of stress like this, they're especially necessary. I love that we started talking about apologies too, because Lindsey, when you were saying to, instead of leading with a critique, take a moment and express your feelings and what you need, your feelings and needs. I was thinking to myself, man, I wish I'd had the ability to do that, but I only think of it after I've snapped at someone. And then I'll wander back after I like storm out of the room, which my meltdown this week was on Tuesday. I don't remember what I yelled at my husband about, but I, you know, stormed out of the room, and it took me like 3 minutes to be like, that was uncalled for. And then I just walked my way back, you know, tail between my legs, and said, I'm sorry. that was not cool. Like, that wasn't about you. My bad. And Brad was like, oh yeah, right. No, totally. I get it. I mean, you're under a lot of stress right now. Duh. It's like that forgiveness, it goes such a long way, and I think we all need to have that compassion with each other. I've got a curveball question for you based off of what I heard on NPR the other day. Okay. I think it was actually a DC based NPR interview that got streamed out here in Denver, but they had a couple of dating experts on to discuss dating in the time of social distancing. And I would love to get your take on that. Are there any safe ways to date right now? What are you hearing or seeing? And what would you recommend for single people who are navigating relationships or those early on in relationships in terms of navigating an early stage dating relationship right now?
Well, I could go.
Lena,
I just had a client who in DC, we're doing our teletherapy sessions. She was like, everybody needs to get on the apps right now. She's like, because all these men are popping up that where have you been all my life? Like, everybody's on the apps now.
Yeah.
But that being said, there's people I know who are in relatively new relationships, and this is actually a great opportunity if you can't see the person to get to know them on a deeper level. And I think of my own marriage. We started dating long distance, and we wouldn't see each other for months, and that was a way for our attachment to grow on a very deep level, without the pressure of any physical intimacy. So what I'm hearing from a lot of single people, I'm actually really happy about what I'm hearing, is that people are connecting a lot. And even if they can't see each other, it's a really good opportunity to really get to know people. People are home a lot more, so they have the time and the effort to focus on that instead of having all these other distractions. So I've heard that it's kind of nice. So yeah. I'm happy about that. I see the optimism in dating and being single right now based on everything I'm hearing.
Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to add, I mean, to me in general, this whole circumstance for me, I am a very mindfulness based practitioner with my clients. So everything for me comes back to yourself, your spirituality, who you are, your connectedness to self and humanity. And to me, this is a time for people to develop deeper intimacy connections with individuals. And just as Lena mentioned, not being able to see people face to face, not being able, I mean, we have a very casual hookup culture when it comes to dating nowadays, and people don't give the time and availability to just connect with individuals. So there's definitely opportunity around that. The challenges that I have been seeing, though, are individuals who do have insecure attachments, and they could in their head say, oh, this person is too busy to not call me back or text me back or get back to me. And now there is no excuse because people are by their phones. So then there's some people that are becoming more anxious that if they're not getting the call back or the text back or the whatever, it's making them more anxious. So I'm seeing it on both ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
And so with that, just being mindful that, you just be open, right? Just be open to whatever relationships might bloom or relationships that you can nurture right now, and try not to take it personally. If you are in that stage of connecting with people and they decide that they don't have an interest in you, everyone has free will to choose who they want to connect with or not, right? And being mindful that there's an abundance of people out there is something that's really important for
definitely
people to remember if they're on that other end of the spectrum.
Right. And not to mention, like, ghosting in the age of a apocalyptic situation must hurt for sure. And yet, it was never about being busy. Maybe it was sometimes about being psychologically distraught themselves and unable to get back to you. You know what I mean? So kind of giving
Absolutely.
people grace, just like we're trying to give
Absolutely.
ourselves grace with what we're all experiencing, I think is key.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And the avoidance can be actually, for some people, a little bit more intense now, because now people are like over extending themselves. Like I've seen people saying, I don't get it. How do I have like 5 virtual meetup invitations
Yeah.
each day, right? Like now I'm being bombarded with so much interaction. And for some people, even though they're not getting the in-person interaction, that can be really
Stimulating. Yeah, for sure.
overstimulating for them,
Totally.
right? So some people might start to pull back a little bit because there seems to be so much more stimulation with connection right now.
Great point.
And I think along those lines, this can be a good time to maybe take a break from dating. I know some people, especially if you're on the apps, you're going on lots of dates and meeting lots and lots of new people. And so maybe this is a nice built-in break for you, or maybe you continue conversations with people you already met in person, but then that can kind of take a pause on it and enjoy kind of a slower pace of things.
Yeah. And be with yourself, right? It can be difficult if you're the kind of person who has filled their life with distractions so that you don't need to be with yourself. Now can be a very, very difficult time.
Absolutely.
But it is potentially productive kind of breakthrough / breakdown time. So being curious about your own emotional state, I think, can also help. Talk about mindfulness.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a big question for you all, and maybe just 1 or 2 more questions before I'll open it up to everyone who's chatting away here, which is lovely. Unfortunately, this crisis is especially problematic for those dealing with domestic abuse, right? All of a sudden, if you have any kind of domestic violence in your relationship, you are feeling quite trapped. What advice or resources would you share for anyone who's experiencing this right now or might be concerned about a friend or loved one who may be experiencing something like this? Lena, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I also would like to add, when we think about domestic violence, including emotional abuse in that and verbal abuse, some people really have to deal with that and on a whole other level. And yes, we're expecting, at least there's a lot in the media about this now. The New York Times had a great article about help for people who are experiencing domestic violence. But everything I've been reading is that people expect the numbers of domestic violence to go up during this time because it's harder to leave, because a lot of the time people leave abusive relationships when the partner is at work or somewhere else. And now that they're with this person all the time, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. And also because there's nowhere to go or nowhere to hide, a lot of the hotlines are probably going to experience less reports of it because they're scared to report because their abuser is in the same room or the same space. And so, it's actually a problem that's happening globally all over the world. And but the shelters right now are deemed as essential services and they're still operating. There's a lot of counselors, and I'll give the number for the domestic violence hotline at the end if you like, or we can put that in the chat.
Yeah.
But they're doing virtual sessions. There's some advice that if you have a trusted person, a family member or friend, to be able to reach out to them, and if they can call somebody on your behalf if you're experiencing any type of really horrible violence or abuse, to call 911 if something gets really bad. For victims, if an argument breaks out, identifying the safest place in your house to go away from objects that might be weaponized. This is what they touched upon in the New York Times article. You could prepare for a situation where an abuser may hide an essential item like soap. So sort of being prepared for those type of situations. But I think the best advice is to seek out shelters, therapists, hotlines, have a trusted person in place to make a call to a hotline on your behalf if you're not able to.
Yeah.
911 in any emergency, and that all these services are essential and still available.
Very, very good points. I'd love to hear more about what emotional abuse looks like too, for those who have not heard that term before. Can you expand on that?
Would you like me, or should give another panelist?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
Sure.
Sure. Go ahead,
So,
Tiffany.
so emotional abuse is using manipulative jargon, which is very close to verbal abuse, using manipulative actions, jargon that coerces individuals into a place of not being safe, essentially, right? So this is attacking the behaviors of individuals, how they look, how they act, minimizing who they are, dehumanizing who they are, belittling them. And this could be as sly as little comments like, oh, you're so stupid, to something extremely intense like, you'll never be able to survive without me, right? And so when people think of domestic violence, as Lena said, sometimes they automatically go to physical abuse, but you have emotional abuse, you have financial abuse, which is also something that is very prevalent during this time as individuals have a scarcity mindset around resources. And now you really have to be under the control of whoever your partner is that's controlling the resources, right? And so it's important, it's hard in that circumstance now that you're not really talking to anybody or not seeing anybody to garner some type of balance when you're experiencing the emotional abuse.
Right.
However, like Lena said, having at least one person that you can confide in during this time is really important. And also an important resource to possibly share is a phone number for the suicide prevention hotline. I know that there has been an increase in that activity and self-harming going on during this time, especially as people feeling like they cannot physically escape their circumstances.
Yeah.
And so yeah, emotional abuse, you know, that's more so done with the power of words.
Good points all around. Yeah, Lena, Lindsey, what would you add to that?
I just want to add that both the National Domestic Abuse Hotline and the Suicide Prevention Hotline have a chat function. So if you are in a space where it's not safe for you to actually verbally speak to someone, they do have a chat version that you can use over text.
Very helpful. Excellent. We're going to get those numbers and resources dropped here into chat in just a minute. But yeah, I think it's a really important time to recognize the rise of hopelessness, right? If you've been looking for evidence as to the end of the world being imminent, you've got plenty of evidence, to back up that fear right now. And this actually came up in our chat earlier with some folks asking about hopeless feelings or asking about overwhelming, crippling anxiety. I do want to give a shout out to our panel last week that covered managing stress and maintaining calm, which we linked to in the chat as well, thanks to Kirby and Ellie's great work on that. But overall, when it comes to managing that feeling of hopelessness, whether you're in a violent relationship or not, if it's just in response to the scary news headlines that we're seeing every single day, what would you advise folks who are having trouble sleeping, who are having trouble eating, who are having trouble, just clearing their mind to function in a basic way?
The first thing I would say is that if you are finding that the level of anxiety or depression that you're feeling is interfering with your ability to work or your ability to maintain relationships, then it is really important for you to seek individual help.
Yeah.
And although most therapists are working remotely and doing video sessions, like all three of us on this panel are, there are therapists who are still taking new clients. And so you can definitely still seek that out right now, even if you don't currently have a therapist. I think one of the reasons I really like the Healthy Minds platter, I'm often referencing back to that, because those 7 elements, I think, help you maintain a sense of balance. So getting enough sleep, and there's a bunch of strategies for sleep. I could do a whole hour-long webinar on that. Getting physical exercise, connecting with other people. And so referencing back to that and noticing, am I getting balance in my life, or is most of my life now kind of looking at the news, or being by myself, and going back and trying to get that balance in small ways.
Great. Excellent.
I would also like to add something that is really important is a gratitude practice. And I know that sounds really oversimplified, but as your mind is going to a place of catastrophe during this time,
right,
you can go into a deep dark hole really fast and constantly think of like the worst case scenario, what I don't have, what's going on, what I'm losing, right? And so being able to have some type of breath practice as you get overwhelmed in the moment, because you're reading something, because you're seeing something, because you're hearing something, and offering yourself some type of counter evidence, meaning like something that's opposite of the anxiety provoking stimulus that you're experiencing,
right,
that gives you some type of positive relief, right? So, you know, of course, the reality is a lot of people are losing their jobs right now, right? Or some people don't really have safe shelter. But trying to pull out the things in your life that you can feel grateful for is really important. Breathing through that is really important.
Yeah. My therapist is always calling that, you know, you're creating new neural pathways, right? So think about those negative, catastrophizing thoughts as just a shortcut that your brain is used to making. And every time you have that catastrophic thought, you know, boom, it strengthens that connection. So how can we work on flexing and working out a different neural pathway? By reminding yourself of what you have to be grateful for. Now, gratitude practices, breathing, getting enough sleep and exercise, these are fundamentals that are non-negotiable right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I want everyone to keep in mind that, you know, it's not going to fix your depression overnight. That's not what we're talking about. But these are foundational prerequisites that, when paired with maybe working with a therapist, can make a huge, huge, huge difference.
Right. It's because the thought patterns that most people are having are intensifying their physiological experience right now. Right. So being able to be mindful of your thoughts, being able to be mindful how much social media you're engaging in, how much news reading you're engaging and, you know, all of this stuff, it's going to continue to basically tell your brain, we're in danger, we're in danger, we're in danger. So you're essentially just wanting to also incorporate activities or practices in your day that help your brain feel safe. And comfortable, right? Because it's just an evolutionary protective response that what your brain is doing right now.
Totally. Lena.
I also wanted to take the stigma off of medication. There's some people who try everything, meditation, and they're not sleeping. And I want to sleep, as you know, again, as mother. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and it can bring down your immune system. It can wreak havoc on your life, on your relationships. And some people try melatonin, they try exercise, they try everything. Their anxiety is still off the charts. And we are in unprecedented times here. I mean, there's so many layers of worry and stress, and they're all so valid. And if people feel like they cannot do it on their own, there is no shame in seeking a medical provider to talk to about what your options might be if you've tried everything and you still need help. And I'm just a big, you know, advocate of whatever is going to help you function. We have things that can do that, or take the edge off your anxiety, even if it's temporary while you get through the crisis. And so people don't need to go to an expensive psychiatrist. They can do, again, an appointment over, telemedicine with a primary care, or One Medical, I've heard, is really good with stuff like that. And so you can talk to a medical professional as well if it gets to that point.
Definitely. I always think of it as, mental health balance for folks comes typically in some form of self-care, therapy, and medication. Do not white knuckle your way through this. Do not self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, right? Like, there are pro level drugs that can help you, and call your doctor. This is worthy of your effort and attention. And for those asking about affordable options, we have a great podcast on that very topic with Melanie Lockert, who actually runs the website mentalhealthandwealth.com. And it's been dropped here in chat. It's episode 190 of the Bossed Up podcast, called Mental Health and Money. And you should definitely listen to that if you're looking for affordable options. Because this is, I don't know how else to say this. We have to prioritize this right now. We have to prioritize our basic human needs right now, because the world is stressful and the demands on you are elevated. So this is not optional, right? Make this a priority.
I want to add another one. Openpathcollective.org is also a low cost. Most therapists on there have lower sliding scales. I think Lindsey dropped some other resources in there as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Where I work at my agency, we all take 10% of our caseload as pro bono or low fee.
Great.
And we have interns that do counseling for free. We're the imagocenterdc.com. Unfortunately, probably have to be for local DC people just because of licensing restrictions. But there are a lot of agencies that will offer low cost services or free services as well.
Totally. I feel like it's so ironic, right? That when you are most in need, getting to the point of actually reaching out and asking for help is so hard, but it is absolutely essential and worth it for what you get on the other side of it. So do put yourself first in this way. Speaking of basic needs, and this is, by the way, my last question for our fabulous panelists. So start thinking about what questions you have for them and drop them into chat right now, and I will ask away on your behalf. Loneliness is something I want to talk about, because human connection is a basic need. We sometimes forget that in the digital age, but long before we were talking about the COVID-19 epidemic, doctors had been talking about loneliness as a global epidemic. So how can folks like us practicing social isolation maintain a sense of community? And why should we? Like, why does that even matter? Lindsey, what's your take?
You're absolutely right that it's a basic need. Our bodies respond to threat in our relationships, of losing our relationships, in the same way that it responds to, if a car was coming at us, or if we're losing our home or our food. And so we absolutely need that to be healthy, physically and mentally. And it can definitely be hard. I know a lot of people are doing, online video chats and things like that. I think it's also just important. It'll depend on where you live and kind of the circumstances that you're in. But even places that are sheltering in place, you can go outside and go for a walk on your own. But, if you are passing by someone's house and they can come out on their balcony or come out on their porch, or maybe your neighbors happen to be in their yard. So even if you're not having an in-depth conversation, physically seeing someone who's not on a video screen can be really helpful.
I was going to say, one of the silver linings of all of this awfulness is that I've never talked to my neighbors more. Everyone's home. And so it's over the fence and I'm like, cool, you're composting. Me too. You know what I mean? It's just so silly. But I borrowed an onion from my neighbor safely. She dropped it off, but that has never happened before. And I've lived here for a year. So it's just an interesting reminder of how powerful that face-to-face connection is. Yeah.
And I think it's important not to discount those types of interactions.
Right.
Not every social interaction has to be some deep, intimate conversation. It can be as simple as, shouting over the fence or waving at someone on the street.
Totally. Tiffany.
And, a lot of my friends, when they heard I was doing this panel, they're all emailing me. They're like, tell everybody about the Zoom happy hours. I know everybody here probably already knows all about them. But that's been great. I mean, I was doing a Zoom, group meeting with girlfriends, and everyone was like, why haven't we done this more? Why haven't we done this before?
Right.
And we were all so busy and tired.
Yeah.
Never, but it's kind of, I think it's enhanced a lot of friendships in the sense that people now are connecting, making more effort to connect. So I think these Zoom kind of like this with friends, doing those. And then there's Marco Polo. For those who don't know, that's been kind of a saving grace for me and my friends and our children. You send videos to each other through an app, and you trade. So throughout the day, we'll send silly videos to each other. And then we'll have our kids send silly videos to each other, and it's something you really look forward to, getting those video messages.
Cute.
There's been creative ways with technology to stay connected, but yeah, the social isolation thing is real. As Emilie, and when I presented and bossed up, that was one of the focuses for me was, loneliness is an epidemic and being really bad for our physical health as well as our mental health. And so we really, I think it's really important to reach out to others when we're feeling lonely for a FaceTime or phone call, and to check in on others, especially those we know that are alone. How are you doing? Sending them those videos, making time to talk with them. This is a time for us to all reach out to everybody and be there for everybody. We're all in this together.
Totally.
And unfortunately, we just have to take advantage of technology until we can be in person again. But as to echo what Lindsey said too, there is a lot of meaning in having those conversations with the neighbor over the fence, and just seeing another human being,
Right.
going for a walk outside.
Totally. Tiffany, how about you?
Yeah, definitely technology. I mean, for myself, I started on my personal IG a morning gratitude practice. So if people want to come in, I do that. Starting to do that Monday through Fridays. My nonprofit, we are starting to do meetups online, and so there's a lot of organizations similarly like yourself, right, that are offering online webinars and events, and a lot of the gyms and fitness studios are streaming workouts and things of that nature. So there's so many opportunities for people to tap in that way. I would be remiss if I didn't just put out there a challenge for people to also spend time in reflection to think about what is it that's coming up for them in this time of loneliness, right? Because it can also be easy when we experience an emotion to try to fight it, mask it, and go fix it right away, as opposed to enter a place of reflection and ask ourselves, okay, well, why is this coming up for me? Why do I feel this way? Because the reality is that there's major grief going on, and most people may not necessarily relate to it as grief, but there's a lot of grief going on, and it's important to be able to sit with that and or seek out professional support to help allow someone to help you through that, right?
Totally.
So there's definitely a place for finding how you can maintain connection, but there's also a place for some self-reflection during this time as these emotions are coming up for you.
Totally. First of all, we got to get the name of your nonprofit in the chat too. So give us a shout out, and Kirby and Ellie can get on it, but also your Instagram. It's Tiff Inspires, is that?
Yes, it's Tiff Inspires, TIFF Inspires, and I'm doing a 10 to 20 minute gratitude practice in the morning every Monday through Friday.
So thoughts on, and this is for the whole panel, but I love this concept that you're throwing out here, Tiffany, which is reflection. How should we be reflecting right now? What does that look like? What has worked for you in the past? I picked up my journal for the first time in years and just did a quick journal entry, and I was like, oh, that felt good. Yeah. But what does reflection look like?
So, I mean, therapeutically, when I use journal reflections with my clients often. So usually after sessions, I give them a question, a prompt for them to process outside of therapy. I'm really big on, if emotions are coming up for you that you can identify, because sometimes people can't actually identify their emotions, but if you can identify certain emotions coming up to you, asking yourself why as much as possible till you get to the core, and where is it coming from. In this time of reflection, when you're getting overwhelmed, when you're feeling anxious, when you're thinking about, well, if I wasn't doing this, I would be doing this, or I can't wait till this is over, just jotting down those things, just those thoughts, and just asking yourself questions. Well, why does it matter to me to be able to go outside? Why does it matter to me to be able to, leave my house whenever I want, right? Like, what does freedom mean to me? What does agency mean to me? Why is that important? What have I been taking for granted? What do I want to lean into more? What do I want to develop more? Why does this feel like I'm losing my life, right? Like, ask when the thought or the question comes up. Usually the best way to like maneuver through that is why. And then other questions might come up. You can Google so many different articles, blog posts around like journal prompts for self-reflection and things of that nature, and you can just go ham with it. I released a book in December called The 5 Commandments of Self-Love, and
Congrats.
thank you.
That's exciting.
And so in that book, I asked tons of questions, but I also developed a journal with it, which is just 90 to 100 questions that are introspective about like your relationship with yourself, right? And so there's tons of journals out there, online downloads through Etsy, through Amazon, all kinds of things where you can just find digital downloads of journals. And if you want to spend more time in reflective space, you definitely have that opportunity.
I'm realizing we're coming up on the end of our time for today, but I do want to give everyone just some last words, an opportunity to share last words. I will also make sure that you have all of our participants' contact information to follow up with them directly. But Lindsey, then Lena, and then Tiffany, last words for our attendees to keep in mind as they move about the rest of their day and week.
I would say just be kind to yourself and be kind to those around you, and understand that this is an unprecedented time that we're living in. So we're all figuring this out together. Everyone's feeling the same way as you. And so just be gracious to everybody as we all try to figure this out together.
Absolutely. Lena.
I wanted to say that, anxiety is all about a loss of control. And I feel so many people are just feeling a complete loss of control right now. And one of the things we can do when we feel that way is just look at the little things that we can control. And I think a lot of powerlessness now also comes from feeling guilty. There's a lot of people who feel sorry, we feel sorry for ourselves in our situation. And then we're also recognizing that it could be a lot worse. People are losing their jobs. They don't know how they're going to pay rent from day to day. Their life is threatened with this illness. And so there's this simultaneous feeling of powerlessness that we can't help others. We have to help ourselves, And so I think just sort of looking at little things that you can do where you can take your power back a little bit. For me, that's been donating money where I can to different organizations. So while I have to stay at home when I kind of want to be out helping people, and also by offering lower fee pro bono services where I can. And so I would just ask everybody to think about what is it that you can have control over that will make you feel a little more empowered, and honor your own self-care, and also knowing that there are small ways that you can give back and make the world a better place right now.
Thanks, Lena.
I would say be gentle, practice, be in gratitude, and think of what opportunity can come from this for you. Whether that's for you to be of service to the world, or, to grow deeper in yourself or with those around you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I could talk with you three panelists forever. So thank you so much for sharing some of your time and expertise with all of us today. Make sure to Google them, connect with them, keep in touch with them if you're just joining us. And know that here at Bossed Up, it's our mission to help you craft a happy, healthy, and sustainable career path. We're really focused on bringing a holistic approach to career advice and training. So as we move all of our stuff digital in this time, I do want to share one opportunity for those of you who are finding yourselves in the very vulnerable position of being on the job hunt right now. I know that's an increasing number of us. I have actually reopened our Hired Job Search Accelerator program to start a new cohort on April 1st. And so at the top of the next month, we have 3 spots left for folks who really want to dive deep into being as persuasive and effective a job candidate as you can possibly be. So if you find yourself just feeling overwhelmed, frustrated by the maybe contradictory information you see out there on the internet, and just not sure how to launch a modern job search, this is the very intensive 3-month program where I give 110% of what we have at Bossed Up to a group of 5 at a time. So we have a few groups of 5, a few cohorts going through the program right now, and 3 spots left in our April cohort if you are looking to join us to really improve your skills, gain a little bit of courage, which I think is best done through community in a small group setting, and get ready to launch your job search as effectively as possible. We've got weekly video lessons that come with small assignments, and some of those assignments are like totally transforming your resume and bringing that to the group call, so that on our weekly accountability calls, we can give you immediate feedback as, from me to you, but also from the whole group to you, looking at your cover letters, looking at your approach, looking at your copy editing, personal branding, etc., and how you're marketing yourself in this very challenging time. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to bossedup.org/gethired. The next cohort starts, like I said, April 1, and that actually is dated. There's only 3 spots left now as of today. And we have 2 different options depending on whether you want one-on-one coaching along with it. But for those of you for whom 3 months is too much of a program, it's too much of an investment, I'll also share with you just some one-off coaching options that we have available, as well as some upcoming workshops that are specifically targeted towards things like updating your resume for the 21st century or navigating networking now that we're all online and not able to do so in person. We've got 3 new workshops that we'll be announcing very soon, if not today, then tomorrow morning. And we'll invite you to those as well. Thank you for being part of this panel today. Whatever you do to move forward in your life and your career right now, let's be mindful of caring for ourselves and caring for others, right? Let's lift as we climb. And welcome to this community for those of you who are new, but for those who are veterans of Bossed Up, please keep in touch. We are here to support you. Lindsey, Tiffany, Lena, thanks so much for being part of today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
There.